From being accused to killing the video game industry in 1983 to having not one, but two notable retail releases in 2022, mere months apart, we gotta hand it to him. Pac-Man has certainly had quite the vast history. I mean, it probably goes without saying, right? Over 40 years and he's still relevant? Dude, I'm still waiting for a sequel to Croc 2. You see, the thing with Pac-Man is this is yet another one of those franchises where you think you know what this little yellow guy is all about, and I'm gonna call you a big fat liar if you state such a claim out loud, because that is not true. Thanks to the recent release of Pac-Man Museum Plus and Pac-Man World Repack, thank you by the way to Bandai Namco for providing a review code for the PC version, the physical Switch version, and this really cool Chogokin figure they can get with the physical game that can also... That's pretty cool. There has been so much interest in this rejuvenated franchise, and I am all here for it. You can call this a care package. And I figure what better time than now to let everyone know, if you didn't know, that Pac-Man is an absolutely insane franchise. To be fair, when you're as long running of a franchise as Pac-Man and you're somehow not in the pit of irrelevance like Pitfall, Frogger, and I don't know, Arrow the Acrobat, I guess, it's expected to see this little yellow lad get stretched as thin as possible without many repercussions. Because like, who cares if Pac-Man Party didn't sell millions? Just re-release the arcade game next week and recoup the costs, it'll be fine. But on this journey, we got a bunch of strange arcade games that completely changed up the typical Pac-Man formula. There were some puzzle games that are thrown in there too, of the Tetris and the drawing varieties. There's a kart racer, because why not? You're not successful unless you have a kart racer. There's Miss Pac-Man, who not only has her own fully fledged console game, but also a very intense legal history as to why she's currently being held captive and replaced with a body double. And also at some point they gave Pac-Man teeth? I hate it. I hate it so much. Hashtag not my pack. Over 40 years of games to check out. I will admit I haven't played every single one. I know, I'm a big fraud. But I did pick out a whole bunch of the highlights, so let's take a look at some of the good, the bad, and the ungodly abominations that Namco decided to release for money that they expected you to buy for some reason. It's a weird franchise. Except for that one time that Pac-Man was ported to Google. That was free. And that was pretty cool. I will admit that one was cool. Ah, Puck-Man. How can anybody forget about Puck-Man? Is it really any surprise that Namco would change his name to Pac-Man after gaining popularity? There were probably too many instances of people altering the arcade signs to say something really naughty like, yuck, man. Obviously, that arcade classic is what most people's minds go to when you first hear the name. Makes sense. It's only one of the most popular games ever, let alone from the 1980s. Pac was one of the very first ever proper characters in a video game that people can attach themselves to. So, naturally, this led to cartoons, cereals, merchandise! Oh god. And of course, many more video games. Namco really took it upon themselves to just mess with the formula at every single chance that they got. When it came to straight ports, I mean, of course, the original has been ported everywhere. There's a version on NES and on Game Boy. If you move ahead a few generations, of course, we got multiple ports of it just on the Switch alone. And how can we forget about the classic Atari 2600 version? Oh my god, games will never look better than this, you know? Pac-Mania, now things are slower, isometric, and you can jump now. Cool. Blinky, the slow, absent-minded one. Hell yeah, dude, same here. Super Pac-Man. Now you're getting keys to unlock doors and not only get fruit, but also these super special power pellets that make you big and the ghosts thin. We got Pac and Pal next. So this one you have a little friend roaming around with you, and while you're out here flipping over cards that reveal doors that lead to the fruits that are on the cards that you just flipped over, maybe the pal will come in and grab the item for you so you have a friend you can trust. And also there's a freeze ray move? What? Pac-Man Plus, the one arcade game that's too risky to include in Pac-Man Museum Plus, which is crazy because it shares 3 of the same words. In this one, it's like, the vulnerable ghosts have leaves sticking out of their head, and sometimes the power pellets will only turn 3 of them blue instead of 4, and the center fruits turn the ghosts invisible. I don't know if the 80s actually happened. Gotta really just take a step back and load up a good old-fashioned game of Professor Pac-Man to get the brain juices pumping again. Now luckily, after Namco executives started to cool themselves down, they really started to fine-tune the arcade experience to make much better games. Pac-Man Arrangement, both for arcades as well as consoles. Now these games are pretty cool. They both take a more traditional level progression approach, where the further you go, the more gimmicks and layouts get introduced, making each new map just a bit more exciting to get into than just, oh, it's like kinda the same but the color's different, I guess. The console version has fancy 3D graphics and multiple boss fights, and the arcade version introduces a brand new ghost who is always invulnerable, but can fuse with an existing ghost to make them more powerful. And he does so by absorbing their bodies? Oh. Kinzo is his name, huh? Well, I played Pac-Man Collection on the Game Boy Advance, and I seem to remember a slightly different name because that version was in that Yep, Kinky. Yep, his name is Kinky. Oh. Pac-Man Versus, what a trailblazer this one is, huh? We got asymmetrical multiplayer on a Nintendo console years before the Wii U. That's dope. Charles Martinet even did a voice for this game. That's pretty cool. Mario was the main thing missing from Pac-Man until this point. And fun fact, this also got a port for the DS in that console's Namco Museum. Pac-Man 256, a mobile and smart TV game. That's interesting, but it's pretty fun. It's one of those endless high score games, and this one you're constantly chased by the evil level 256 glitch, trying to get a huge pellet chain, utilizing some power-ups to tackle the ghosts in brand new ways. It's a pretty fun take on the formula, very, very replayable. And I mean, simply acknowledging the fabled 256 glitch in an official game as like this weird, creepy thing to run away from like it's a nightmare. I love that, that's awesome. Remember when Super Paper Mario referenced the minus world? That's just cool. Well, let's go a few numbers back. There's also Pac-Man 99, and this one's all right. I guess it made sense after doing the same thing with Tetris the year before, but this one, I don't know, it's just not as chaotic and therefore it's not as fun. You see, the thing with Tetris 99 is you never really knew what was gonna happen, but you did feel like you had a bit of control in the attacks that you were laying out to different people. In Pac-Man, you're kinda just playing the arcade game and a bunch of web pop-ups are showing up to slow you down as a distraction. That's about it. It's not that good, I'm sorry. But Championship Edition though, oh boy, now this is the true hotness. What if I wanted to play Pac-Man but feel like I'm in an intense nightclub as well? Let's go! This was one of the first times a modern game took the classic sprite graphics and covered it with a whole bunch of crazy lighting effects and a bumpin' soundtrack. It's no surprise that games like Galaga, Space Invaders, and Frogger would try to capture the same vibe soon after. But there's no dethroning the king, baby. Pac-Man Championship Edition is so damn cool. And a really interesting piece of trivia here, this was the final game that Pac-Man's creator, Toru Iwatani, would work on, after not touching much of anything since the 80s. As a result, many consider this to be the proper sequel to the original arcade game because, I mean, fair enough, no Pac-Man game after the original had a 2 on it. Oh god. And nowadays, I mean, sure, Championship Edition 1 is fun, but once DX came around, and you start building these massive chains of ghosts, and you're hearing these intense gobble-gobble sounds and surround sound with an incredible soundtrack, filled with these songs that were composed with the 5 and 10 minute time limits in mind, so things ramp up incredibly by the end, oh man, there is nothing like it. Championship Edition 2 would come around years later, having similar gameplay but shifting the single map that you play on in DX to progressing onto different maps after clearing one out, and you also get this snazzy 3D for taking out the ghost chains now. That's pretty cool, thank you 2016. But personally, I do think DX is better than 2. Both are still great, but man, DX really hits in a way that no other game has for me. And really, if anything, it's wild to think about just how much mileage they got out of this formula that they established all the way back in 1980. They couldn't even make a second Dig Dug game without making that bad. And also, while I'm at it, quick shoutouts to Annalyn on Steam. This game is fantastic. It's like this really cool take on the original Pac-Man idea, but it's also a platformer and also has a dope soundtrack. That's all I really got. I just wanted to bring up Annalyn. This game is really fun, and I hope it gets ported to every console ever because it's really good. You remember when Pac-Man was like the only good thing about that one movie, Pixels? That was a really gross movie. You should be ashamed of yourself, Adam Sandbag. So that is the arcade side of things, and I know many of you are probably saying to yourself, well, didn't you forget about Miss Pac-Man? No, of course not. Namco certainly is right now, though. Oh man, okay, so like, oh god, this whole story is absolutely nuts, man. So, The original game, Miss Pac-Man, the arcade game that we all know, was technically like an official ROM hack of the original Pac-Man, and it was something that Namco never technically owned, I think is how it goes. Midway is the company that owned the license. Things were starting to get very hairy after merchandise royalties were becoming too high, and while the license would end up falling back to Namco for a little while, the General Computer Corporation Group would have to be paid royalties for use of the character in commercial contexts, and in 2019, those royalties would then be acquired by, AntGames. That's a very long story short, but yes, essentially, you know those garbage Micro Genesis consoles that you see in your local Walmart's bargain bin? The company that was initially gonna do the official Genesis Classic, and then after social media outrage, Sega said, you know what, never mind, they're gone, we're gonna do it instead. Yeah, those guys. Those are the guys who are responsible for us not having Miss Pac-Man nowadays. Great. So rather than Namco simply try to work with them and then pay them, they basically decided to just move on as if Miss Pac-Man never existed. Newer collections never feature the classic game. I mean, perhaps this is why we didn't get the obvious skin for Pac in Smash. Always thought that would have made the most sense in the world. Any games that did have her in Pac-Man Museum Plus now feature a redesign, so they went back in and changed up some of these really old ROMs just to avoid dealing with AntGames. That's hilarious. And I'm even convinced that this is the entire reason why Pac-Man World got a full-blown remake, just to replace the entire Pac family and act as if the originals were never there. Now we have Pac-Mom. Now we get to show off Pac-Mom to the world. I mean, I understand it, but it doesn't mean I gotta like it. So, Pac-Mom exists now. This is the one we have to get used to. Namco did try a few other female Pacs over the years, probably all gonna be one-offs, honestly. But as far as the original Miss that we all know and love, well, her final official appearance was in Sonic Dash, of all things, for a Pac-Man crossover event. Man, I did not see that one coming. And dude, even Namco knows this is all insane too. Just like, let's just jettison AntGames into the sun. I think that'll be fine. All of this spotlight on the brand new Pac-Mom is certainly wild to see, but there are two bright sides. For one, we all have a new public reason to shame AntGames, and that is something that I am all for, but also, it led to a whole lot of conversation around Pac-Man World with Repack. That's a really good thing. I'm very happy about that. Shame on you, AntGames. Pac-Man platformers. This is what many of you came to see, right? It's so interesting to think about just how far they took this different take on the franchise back in the day. I mean, we had Pac Land, that was a side-scroller with strange controls and you kept running into a fairy for some reason. This was really the best thing to make a stage out of in Smash. Really? You got all these other adventures to pull these great ideas out of, but this is the game you go with. Okay, sure. But no, if anything, that's just a game that was coinciding with the original cartoon, and any of the weirdness with this one is sort of self-contained. There was also the other side-scroller, Pac in Time, and that's a whole other weird mess of annoying mechanics like a bad rope swinging system and a really cumbersome item inventory management system. It's kinda neat that they were willing to revive this one for the newer museum, but who really cares? This is all based off of a weird Amiga game called Fury of the Furries anyway. I can assure you, we are not missing much with this one's legacy. And besides, this face is scary, I don't want it. At this time in Pac's history, there was really no basis to make a 3D platformer that can hang with the rest during the PS1 generation. So, Pac-Man World is really just Namco trying out a bunch of different ideas with their star franchise to see what'll stick. And stick it did, surely all thanks to Mr. T and Mini-Me hyping it up in the commercial. Guaranteed success, I miss the 90s. Well, who else were you gonna get? And with this new initiative, man, we got a whole ass trilogy with a couple of spin-offs, some weird handheld ports many years later. They're not good, but we'll get to that. And recently, a remake? Yo, props to World for being the beefiest side series in this franchise to date. And you know, honestly, the first Pac-Man World, subtitled 20th Anniversary, is a pretty fun time. The whole idea is it's his 20th birthday party, and it's ambushed by the ghosts, and his family is kidnapped. Something pretty cool about all this is actually acting as if he's 20 years old here. He has a wife, kids, a house, and a mortgage by age 20? Okay, Namco, this is a pretty unrealistic game right here. Once the novelty of this being a Pac-Man game starts to wear off, it's realistically just a pretty fine platformer. It doesn't really do anything wrong, but it doesn't necessarily excel at anything either. It's a functional adventure that expands on the character's mobility with new movement options like a butt bounce and a rev roll. It's just a spin dash. I don't care if you call it something else, it's a spin dash. We got the addition of some personality to the ghost characters. It introduces some nightmare fuel to the franchise with Pac-Man.
My plans are already in motion. Pac-Man cannot be allowed to crash my party.
Really scared me as a kid. It integrated Puka from Dig Dug into the family. That's one of the goodest boys around. I'm a big fan of that. And also Pac-Man screams. Gotta admire the smile he holds throughout most of this adventure after that though. That's a level of happiness that we should all strive for. What's that? My family is gone and I gotta travel on a boat to go save them? That's fine. Nothing's gonna kill my happiness, damn it. Also, during the opening segment where all of Pac's family is getting kidnapped, do you ever take the time to freeze frame on the cat? You're welcome. What the hell is this? Given that there is once again not much identity that can be pulled from the arcade games, a lot of world could feel kind of generic at times. We got some pretty standard level themes with tried and true platformer obstacles and mechanics, collectible letters scattered throughout the stages, a soundtrack that mostly hovers around the okay territory. It's really the fruit that you can find and the pop-up ghosts and mazes that remind you, oh yeah, this is a Pac-Man game. Like you have these full-on mazes as these extra side areas with all these unique layouts as basically a collectible throughout the adventure. You go and get a Galaxian piece, bring it back to a door, and hey, it's a maze. That's what Pac-Man does best. It's kinda cool. But nothing else really stands out, aside from it being just a pretty well-designed game. It's a charming and inoffensive enough romp from start to finish without really any downtime, and because it was on the PS1, this golden age for 3D platformers, a lot of nostalgia was to follow. That's just by the pure nature of being on the PS1 of this era. I'm nostalgic for Jersey Devil 2, because it was there. Nowadays though, it's easier to recognize that the bigger things that are bogging this game down are really just a lot of small issues that could really only be fixed if something like a remake were to Pac-Man World Repack. I cannot believe this is real. Listen, the absolute jank of the PS1 game certainly has its charm. I am a big fan of it, but to have a somewhat cult classic of a platformer get a full-blown remake? I honestly thought I would never see the day. Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Medieval, Resident Evil 2, this PS1 remake trend I am all in favor of. Let's do Pepsi Man next. Clearly Ape Escape is never gonna happen, so why not? Essentially, Namco went back and took their average platformer and easily, without a doubt, made a definitive version of it. There's no like, oh, I don't know, the physics of the PS1 Crash Bandicoot games can kind of feel better in this. No. This is easily the better version of the game. I would love to hear the arguments that say otherwise. There are just so many small changes that really make this a better experience overall. The power pellets turn you giant now, that's really cute. The controls are razor sharp. Some of the music is remastered, I think? It's weird. Some of the songs are these really clear remixes, while some of them sound like straight rips of the PS1 game. I don't know, the soundtrack is still kind of just alright. It's just weird how this version was handled. But the bosses though, oh man, the bosses. This was one of the worst parts of the original game. Dude, the Anubis fight was so bad. Spinning on these platforms and trying to not accidentally jump off when you're being bombarded by obstacles in 3 different directions, it was the worst. It was the worst fight in like any platformer ever. And yes, it is now fixed in Repack. Like I said, an objectively better game. The vast majority of the platforming stages remain unchanged and therefore maintain that same level of quality of just being a really solid platforming time. But all of these bosses have been improved to some capacity. Like in the original, there was this race against clowns in the carnival stage, and it was fine. The top-down thing was really weird and the controls were very loose. It's a cute novelty, but whatever. Here though, it's in first person now, and the controls are great. I love the bosses in this version. They were once the worst part of the game, and now they were something I was looking forward to. And there's also the addition of these brand new cutscenes before the boss fights that show Pac-Man's influence on them, whereas before, you saw nothing of him until the end of the game. This is way better. It reminds me of Yoshi's Island when the Magic Koopa would come in and like over the bosses. That was great. I love that. That's an awesome thing. And then when it comes to the artistic style, I think this looks way better too. Like the nightmare fuel that we had with the original Pac-Man, that got put in the scrapyard where it belonged. Accept the newer and better Pac-Man. This is so good. I even have to give props to the UI. The game doubles down on Pac's arcadey roots by keeping the score and all of the Pac letters on screen at all times. Everything else about this game has been maintained and polished to a degree, as it was expected to be, but the way the score is always on screen now and numbers are popping up whenever you get pellets and whatnot, it actually adds a bit of an arcadey vibe to this game that was missing before, and helps make this feel like a proper Pac-Man game. I never thought I would actually praise a game for keeping a high score system in 2022, but damn it, they did it. It makes sense here. All that being said, some issues still hold this game back from true greatness. We still have an adventure where nothing really comes off as totally original. And since everything is faithfully recreated, this means that basically every level requires a little bit of backtracking, since you often got to use this fruit that you just got for a locked door that's a few screens back. That is a very common trope with this game, but even still, it's fine. Namco took their classic average platformer, and now it's an above average platformer. The child in me who grew up with the original is pleased. Even if they removed the scream at the start, that does take away a few points, I'm not gonna lie. And hey, this whole Pac-Man World idea is just cool for giving a little bit of extra lore to Pac-Man himself for having a full-on family now. And hey, Miss Pac-Man was a big deal of a character too, right? You know, no one really cares about the kids, but Miss Pac-Man, oh, she's someone special. Well, I know that nowadays Namco doesn't want you to know about this, but we got a bit of a secret game that came out next after the original PS1 game. In between the releases of Pac-Man Worlds 1 and 2, we got Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness. You remember how in the original world we had all those maze sections hidden behind doors? Well, let's make an entire game around that. On a quest to save Professor Pac from the mirror that he's been sucked into, you go across the 4 wonders of Pac-Land to gather special gems and take down, an evil witch? And her giant evil green Pac-Man. Alright. Like World before it, it is a super straightforward game. It is just very mechanically sound. You got levels of unique maze layouts strung together by a little bit of puzzle solving and a little bit of enemy dodging, with some new elements thrown in from time to time, like top-down racing. They were really on that car racing idea back then, weren't they? This is really one of those games that kinda shows its entire hand early. While we do see some slightly new mechanics and puzzle opportunities as we progress, and the theming does definitely get a bit more original than Pac-Man had, like we have Egypt, and then China with these enemy Chinese dragons, that's super cool. This is still a what you see is what you get kind of deal. Saved by it still being a relatively unique idea, this is certainly one of the furthest ways the core maze gameplay has ever gone in terms of making an entire adventure out of it. And also, the soundtrack. The soundtrack to this game is incredible and very important to the game's overall enjoyment. Go and listen to Cleopatra, that song is amazing. As far as a potential remake goes, I kinda think this is one of those games that's gonna be stuck in the past. I don't know, man, Pac-Mom's Maze Madness just doesn't really roll off the tongue as much. Even if she has a super cool hat, I'm sorry, I'm calling it like I see it. I deeply apologize to all of you Pac-Mom fans out there. I hope both of you can forgive me really soon. And then we got Pac-Man World 2. Now this is where it's at. Let's just embrace this right out of the gate. The originality is, once again, not really this game's strong suit. We have a grassland, an ice land, a lava land, whatever. The game controls like a dream, and that is much more important. While the original had this sort of side-scrolling 3D thing going on, World 2 goes for full-on 3D and polishes up all of the mechanics to boot. Rolling around is a lot more fun, some of the pack chain segments are a lot more visually interesting, and the bouncing, man, the bouncing in this game is so much more satisfying. And the developers knew this too, it's obvious. Stages like Bedoing Woods, where you're bouncing up a ton of super tall trees, it is great platforming stuff. And then the bosses, while they also sacrifice originality, just using the ghosts with these robot suits this time around, I mean, hey, it kinda stinks, but it adds some more Pac-Man flavor to this adventure, and that's fine by me. Even the main baddie, Spooky the Ghost, he's just an advanced ghost. It works perfectly. This game is just a constant burst of platforming goodness from start to the water world, where you do multiple obnoxious auto-scrolling water levels back to back to back. Dear God, why did they save all of these for just one world? This part sucks. Namco should go to jail. And did you look back at the opening cutscene and see the pack dog? Dude, it was an actual dog before. What happened? This is a tiny person walking on all fours. I do not like it. No sir, I do not. And Miss Pac-Man's nowhere to be seen in this adventure. I'm not really sure why that's the case. Maybe they were having a marriage dispute. I don't know. Maybe they could figure that out in the remake. Who's to say? As platformers started to get more complicated during this generation, bleeding together these different genres in an attempt to age up with the older audience, it's nice to have a relatively standard but very polished platformer thrown into the mix. And if World 2 does eventually get a repack of its own by the time you're watching this, then hey, there are definitely some perks to this good timeline. Pac-Man World 3, on the other hand. Okay, I got it. What if Pac-Man learned how to kick ass in hell? Grand Theft Auto 3, Jak 2, Ratchet Deadlocked. If you want to be successful now, Pac-Man, you gotta get edgier. That's the only option. Oh man, oh baby, listen to that dope title screen music. Hope that sound of wind pumps you up for a great adventure.
Did someone say cake?
Oh god, they talk now? God, Pac-Man having like a weird, normal human voice is so damn cursed, but honestly, it's not that bad. Like, I would clearly rather he doesn't talk at all, but maybe this well-done animation is fooling me here. I actually really like the voices in this game. But then you get into the game itself and God, World 3 is so weird. Pac-Man's in a post-apocalyptic world now. Why is everything so dark and murky? The soundtrack is all mellow and ambient instead of upbeat and catchy. It's just weird. And there's a combat system? Oh god, Irwin? This is the villain? We jumped from a Robo Pac-Man to a big spooky ghost to a destroy all humans alien looking reject. Man, those forehead wrinkles. Should have invested in some lotion, that's probably why he's so mad. Along the way, Orson is helping you out too. In an interesting bit of continuity, that is the ghost who was controlling Pac-Man in the original Pac-Man world, and now he's deciding to like be good. It's a weird piece of continuity that I appreciate. It's strange. Everything about this game is strange. But it's not like the game is bad. Honestly, this continues the trend of the game playing fine with some solid platforming mechanics, but it's really hard to take this so seriously when the game is taking itself so seriously. This is Pac-Man. Why am I traveling through hell like it's Doom? If you want some of that patented wackiness that you would come to expect for a platformer, well, the game does have these maze sections, but man, we got this really repetitive, kooky, over-the-top music and these techie visuals because you're jumping into arcade machines and that's how it's done this time around. They don't really spice things up the way that they thought they might. The maze sections in the previous games were optional, and here, they're mandatory, and by doing that, on top of the weirdness, it's not a good fit. You got sections where you get to play as some of the ghosts. Pac-Man gets to be sassy with his new demon-looking wannabe threat. He's scary looking too. There are multiple ways to take down enemies now because you have your fist combos as well as these power-ups that pop up over time. I'll give him credit, there was some genuine effort put into this, but it is ultimately just too much of a monotonous and soulless adventure to really sit through the entire thing in one piece, unless you're a dedicated Pac nut like I am. Which is a shame, because this attempt to actually give Pac a voice and a personality, I do think that part worked out really well. Certainly better than... But hey, if Pac-Man waka-waka-ing through the underworld sounds exciting to you, then give it a shot. You never know, you might like it. You know, this is around the same time that like, Ty the Tasmanian Tiger made a jump in the third game to a really dark world. Maybe this was like, just a literal dark time for platformers in the mid-2000s. It made sense, it's just weird to look back at.
I'm detecting a rise in energy in your sector, Pac-Man.
Details of my sector's energy should be between me and Miss Pac. Thank you very much.
Didn't need that innuendo about Pac-Man's power pellets, thank you. A kart racer now though, okay, so that's the only way you really know your platformer series is actually worth a damn. Pac-Man World Rally. I mean, yeah, it's a Mario Kart clone, but that's never a bad thing. If the first two Pac-Man World games are very standard platformers, then this, yeah, it follows the trend. It is a very standard kart racer, with all of the item types and craziness that you've come to expect. The only main gimmick with this one is that there are Pac pellets scattered throughout the stages, kinda similar to Mario Kart's coins, but once you collect enough, you can go into Power Pellet Goblin mode and chomp away on anybody that you come across. Pretty neat. And character-wise, oh, they really nailed this roster too. Of course, we got some of the members of the Pac fam, that's to be expected. We got some ghosts, Clyde has a new hat, I really like his style, very nice dude. And even all of the villains from the World trilogy. That continuity, really nice. It makes the whole World thing seem like it was not for nothing. We even get Pac Satan. Hell yeah, dude. Has nothing to do with the rest of the trilogy. They just decided, hey, we got a car racer coming up, let's Let's make a Pac Satan, I guess. And then you got some other Namco characters as unlockables, like the enemies from Dig Dug, the prince from Katamari, and the PSP version also exclusively has Mr. Driller and Mappy. That's pretty cool, a 3D model of Mappy, for some reason only in the PSP game. There's really just weird choices left and right with this franchise. And then when you get to the tracks, yeah, a lot of them continue the trend of being fairly generic, but hey, some things certainly stand out more than others as potential callbacks, like a pirate track, which, I don't know, could be a reference to World 1, maybe? None of the tracks really super stand out as a throwback. It's mostly the final classic cup where the coolest stuff is, like a space stage with a Galaga influence, a full-blown Katamari course, that's awesome, and a traditional Pac maze. Makes total sense. World Rally has a maze stage, Smash Ultimate does not. The world is cruel and unjust. There are so many Mario Kart clones out there. It's kind of hard to stand out from the pack in terms of gameplay, but in terms of aesthetics, yeah, I mean, Pac-Man doesn't really do anything super specific to stand out, but it's a fun enough time, and a decent way to wrap up the series in terms of its original games. Pac would later show up with Mario in the arcade card games, and that's kinda cool too. Those games got some solid fan service, and it's stuff like that that makes me want to see more of these crossovers in later Mario Kart games, but that's an entirely different topic. As it stands, the World Trilogy, Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness, World Rally, pretty solid stuff all around. And then they tried to revive the series on the Game Boy Advance, and Jesus Christ, why? You see, alongside their console releases, we got World 3 and World Rally on PSP, and World 3 even showed up on DS, and they are worse than the console versions, that's to be expected, but they're functional enough given what those systems were capable of. The fact that we have World 3 on DS and it actually kinda works is a technical marvel, but there's no reason to actually play it. It's the worst version of an already below average game. But now, why in the mid-2000s we got World 1, Maze Madness, and World 2 for Game Boy Advance? This is one of the most confusing sets of releases I've ever seen. The games weren't new enough to be the next best thing to purchase, nor old enough to have a growing sense of nostalgia yet. Was anybody asking for these? The DS was about to be the hot holiday item for those few years. Pac and Miss Pac were sent out to die. So, okay, the first two, World 1 and Maze Madness, are definitely iterations of the console games. Very clearly, we have level designs being pulled onto the smaller screen. And mechanically, they're pretty sound, I guess. The music has been ported in an incredibly crusty way. Oh god, maybe it sounds better on official speakers, but this is gross. And outside of some elements that are removed, like most of the boss fights, they did kind of accomplish what they set out to do. They look absolutely cursed, and when blown up on a big screen like this, yeah, they look terrible. But if they were set out to, for some reason, port World 1 and Maze Madness to the Game Boy Advance, they did it. I just don't know why. Nothing about this seems to make these versions of these games appealing outside of the sheer novelty of it. Like at the time, I remember thinking, oh, Maze Madness on Game Boy Advance, that's sweet. And then I got into level 1, and Cleopatra is not the song that plays there. It's not in the game at all. So, okay, they removed all the good music from the game that I wanted to play. Easy 0 out of 10 score as a result. Sorry. When it came to World 2, which released a while later, you can tell that they at least tried to take some creative liberties with the original adventure. Like, I think the new sprites are really nice, so I'm glad there's some effort there instead of just shrinking down the images of the original PS1 sprites in MS Paint. The music has, once again, been butchered though. Like, these games on consoles had great soundtracks, but then they ported the more mediocre stuff exclusively and placed them in the levels that they didn't initially belong to. I don't get it. I mean, I guess considering it's not like the GBA had much in terms of 3D platformers, I guess this is one of the ones to check out if you're an insane person. All things considered, yeah, these ports are really dumb. Interesting little asterisks on the side of the main console games, but hey, as the GBA era came to a close, a shocking amount of console platformers also got mediocre GBA versions just to, I don't know, prank the parents of small children who ask for these games. Damn it, Mom, no, I didn't want Dr. Muto on Game Boy Advance. The holidays are ruined once again. Pac-Man World, if it wasn't obvious enough, is the most interesting side series of this entire franchise. But granted, this is coming from someone who has a very strong bias towards mid-2000s platformers, but I feel like if you're watching this, you probably do too. We share a common bond there. Hope I'm not too forward. But now, this is likely to start the talk of the future of the franchise with the ghostly adventure stuff. And, I'll get to it, but can we wait a few more minutes? I'm not ready yet. Throughout the 80s, Pac-Man was a relatively safe franchise with all of those arcade games. Sure, some of them were weird, but they were similar enough, so it was fine. Credit goes to Namco. It took at least 10 years before they finally said, hey, you know what? I think it's time to go insane. Pac-Land was an outlier in 84, but again, that was thanks to the cartoon that was happening around the same time. And what, yeah, did you forget about that part? You thought that only the likes of Mario, Zelda, and Sonic were getting cartoons? Nah, man, the fine folks at Hanna-Barbera thought it was high time to give Pac-Man a hat, throw him into a crazy dream world with these multicolored trees and a laughing cat, and also a main villain in Mesmerin? Who's using the ghosts in order to gather all the power? Who the hell is Mesmerin? I'll admit, I am a fan of this show. There is a really big charm to these old cartoons, especially if Hanna-Barbera was involved, but man, I don't know what went into the creative decision for any of this. And I also don't really know why there was this fascination with like creating an ultimate evil that was controlling the ghosts the entire time. Like if we take a look back at Pac in time, we got the Ghost Witch in that one, who had the power to force Pac, well, back in time, I guess. She can make things travel in time just by pointing at them. That's kind of cool. And also, shrink his appendages and remove his nose in the process? God, what a bitch. However, that was not her debut. She initially showed up in Pac-Man 2, there's a 2, The New Adventures, where Pac is having a damn panic attack on the box art. God, I feel bad for him. He wasn't having a panic attack on the not American box art, and then when they localized it, they were like, yeah, that's what the game needs to satisfy the Americans, have him lose his mind. I can't believe it, man, we finally have an actual sequel to that original arcade game, that's awesome! And it's a point-and-click adventure game where Pac is a brain-dead imbecile, and you play as an omnipotent god telling him what to do and where to go on a regular basis, and if you want to, you could kill him if you want. Okay, I understand the panic attacks now. I love this game. It's absolutely terrible, don't get me wrong. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. Have you seen Pac-Man's walking cycles? Why is this a thing? But it's because of that I love this game. For the love of God, the first thing you do is milk a cow because your baby is hungry, and to do so, you approach near death from a rogue crow. This game is incredible. And looking back at some of those walk cycles, man, like his emotions, he's so all over the place. Like he's happy one second, depressed the next, and then like super pissed off, and then he's egotistical. Like, why was this not the basis for what we got in Smash? Like, this would have made for a more interesting character. What we got was cool, but Pac-Land was not the right inspiration. It was either gonna be World or this, and I opt for this. Oh, but of course, it's not a nice and bright sunny day in Pac-Land, no. As you probably expected, this adventure brings you deep into the inner city, into a mysterious warehouse where you find all the ghosts who are working for the Ghost Witch, and you have to go in to stop her evil plans of, stealing all of the kids' ABC gum and form a gum monster? Okay. Yes, I'm also definitely calling him the Gum Monster and not succumbing to internet peer pressure to get myself demonetized. No thank you, I don't care what the text at the bottom of the screen says, or what it looks like. This is made of chewed gum, and you are not going to tell me otherwise. I want to keep my channel, thanks. Pac Attack. Now this one was kind of inevitable too. You know, if a 3D platformer has to have a car racer, then I guess a more basic game has to have a puzzle alternative spin-off. Then that makes sense to me. What we got with this one is just a bit of a different take on the typical block-falling Tetris puzzle game idea. You're dropping a bunch of blocks, a lot of them have ghosts in them, but you have to line them up in specific ways because eventually you're gonna have to drop Pac-Man onto the board and he's gonna go in a straight line to gobble up as much as he can, and this is a very annoying game. Novel idea for sure, but man, I am not good at it at all. I pride myself on being pretty good at games like this, but this one, I can't get a good chain going to save my life. And besides, we all know that this game has a Tetris Attack-like story where this is just a blatant reskin of the other Super Nintendo classic, Cosmo Gang the Puzzle. I mean, once I learned about that nugget, I couldn't look at Pac Attack the same way, you know? What do you mean you haven't heard of Cosmo Gang the Puzzle before? Are you trying to tell me that you've lived a normal life until now? Probably one of the most forgotten games in this franchise, we got Pac-Man Pinball Advance. I guess this is another game that is kind of in the World series, actually. I mean, that house here is ripped right out of World 2, so I guess this is part of the World series. I don't know why they didn't use the World name, but okay. These poor ghosts here, they have really gone through some traumatic moments, you can tell. As a pinball game, I mean, it's fine, I guess. It's pinball, alright. Not really a great time, but I mean, if you're looking for a pinball game on the Game Boy Advance that's not Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire, I guess it's better than Mario Pinball? Maybe? Yeah, you know, at this point, I think it's really safe to say that alongside all of those weird world ports, Pac-Man's history on handhelds is really something else, to put it lightly. We jump forward a little bit and we move on to the DS. It's not like things really got better. We got Pac-Pix, which is a game that I'm not totally convinced actually exists. It's just a glorified tech demo where you're poorly drawing Pac-Man and a bunch of other shapes for a few hours to take out all of the ghosts that are on screen at that given time. And that's it. Early era DS games all kind of fit that same mold, you know? You can tell that they just had this one touchscreen idea and figured that was enough to bring it to retail. It was a weird time. But I mean, okay, just the fact that you could draw something and watch it animate on the fly, yeah, it works. This game works. It operates as intended. Good for them. This is like a working screensaver. Oh no, watch out, we got the boss now, and it's a big ghost. I guess I gotta draw a big Pac-Man now. Oh no, now it's a bigger ghost. This is one of the games of all time. Oh man, okay, so then next up we have Pac and Roll, which is, once again, a glorified tech demo given a full release. But, to be fair, this one is a little bit more substantial. Using the touchscreen, you roll around a limbless Pac-Man across the world and do the standard thing of picking up a bunch of pellets and destroying ghosts. That's it. Oh, and did a ghost touch you? Well, it's okay. Now there's a touchscreen minigame to get it off you. God, why am I not surprised? But I will give the game credit. It's really not that bad. Just based on the simple notion of having actual level progression with elevating challenges throughout. You got a few power-ups that change things up from time to time. And quite frankly, just the fact that we have a full 3D game on the DS that plays kind of okay. Dare I say, sarcasm aside, Roll is good. They have since ported Roll to the Wii's Namco Museum Remix and the modern Pac-Man Museum Plus, and some of that novelty is gone when you use an analog stick to control things instead, as well as completely removing the story. Not sure why that didn't get preserved. They could have ported that easily, but okay. But ultimately, you know, I've seen what a lot of DS screens at the kiosks at Walmart used to look like. It was probably for the best to shift the control style. That makes sense to me. Oh god, and then speaking of Namco Museum Remix and whatnot, that doesn't even cover all of the other games that Pac was just shoved into. We got Gallagher Remix, Pac is there. Rally X Remix, Pac is there. Gator Panic Remix, Pac is there. What the hell is Gator Panic? There's Pac Motos, and hey, I mean, that one had the decency to be ported to Pac Museum, so that one's nice, but why? It's not even good. This yellow guy, he really gets around. I can't believe people don't suffer from Pac-Man burnout. Ah, Mario Party clones, it's about time. Pac-Man Fever, featuring such esteemed characters like Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Heihachi from Tekken, that one Avatar from the early PlayStation 3 days. Now, to call this specific game a clone would be a bit disingenuous. Pac-Man Fever has the distinction of, rather than moving to a new space and then playing a minigame, you do the minigame first, and then you move. Namco, you gotta slow down! Regarding the boards that you play on, this actually goes for more of the linear path idea way before Mario Party 9 did, so hey, bit of a trendsetter. So while there is arguably a bit more skill involved than the typical Mario Party game, since the better you do in the minigames, the further you get to move, the spots themselves that you land on have a whole lot of luck attached to them in regards to what the actions are after you land on them, completely disregarding any skill that you were attempting to bring to the party in the first place. It's still fine. If you're super nostalgic for this one, then that's fine too. I guess we've all been to at least one or two bad parties in our day, and you have memories attached. That makes sense. Nowadays though, this is a pretty soulless experience. I don't think I'll be cracking this one open with the boys anytime soon. For my money, it's all about Pac-Man Party. This is the better of the two, without a doubt. I mean, it's still not super great, but it's less not great than Fever was. So that's put that on the back of the box. Chibi robo characters sounding ass. Some of you may realize that this is actually where everybody got their massive redesign, the start of the quote Pac is back era, let's just say. And it's an interesting development, this whole redesign thing. I actually don't really hate how Pac and all of the ghosts look in this one. Pac's look is more cartoony, I can work with that, and then the ghosts, each one has a unique look rather than just having a different color. I like that too. I do definitely prefer the simplicity of the designs from Pac-Man World, but hey, this Pac-Man doesn't have teeth yet. Why on earth would they decide to give him teeth after this? I want to die. Pac-Man Party certainly follows a more traditional formula that you would come to expect from a Mario Party clone. You roll a number and then you move across a looping board. You're gathering not only your special item, which in this case is cookies, but also growing properties along the way? Alright, that's a unique twist. You mean to tell me this man has a mortgage to pay and now owns multiple properties? Man, we're really breaking the realism here, Namco. And it's when an opponent lands on your castle, that's when it's minigame time. And it's a Wii game, alright. Did you think we weren't gonna have gimmick controls in this one? Like any other Mario Party styled game, this is where this party shines. The minigames are pretty fun, and just as nonsensical as you could possibly want. They have like nothing at all to do with classic Pac-Man. Like Pac-Man World before it, it's really just Namco throwing as many different ideas at the wall to see what sticks, so it makes absolutely no sense if you've been a diehard Pac-Man fan, but hey, it's fine. Don't ask questions about why there's an Anubis and a random Yeti here, only to ever show up in a single mobile game after this, and then presumably die. Whatever, it's fine, just enjoy the party, it's a good time, you're hanging out with friends, yay! The thing that really does it for me is I just think the personality in this one is a lot stronger than what we had in Fever. If you're looking for a kinda fun multiplayer Wii session, and you've destroyed your nearest copy of Wii Party or Wii Play Motion or Mario Party 8, then sure, hop onto this one instead of jumping into Sonic and the Secret Rings stupid multiplayer mode. That is the direct competition, I guess. Don't question it, this game is better than that. And then, after riding the momentum of this redesign, we would then get Pac-Man and Galaga Dimensions for the 3DS. Chalk this one up to the 3DS launch window games that nobody remembers category because, did you remember this game until I mentioned it? Probably not. On its surface, it's just another one of those compilations because we have classic Pac-Man, classic Galaga, and even the upgraded classic arcade games like Pac-Man Championship Edition. That's here, that's nice. But the main selling point is two brand new games. Galaga 3D Impact, a mediocre on-rail shooter that uses the console's gyroscope and really feels absolutely nothing like Galaga. And then Pac-Man Tilt, a 2D platformer void of any personality where the only gimmick is tilting the 3DS left and right to mess with some of the platforms. I'm so tired. There was such a long stretch of time where Namco had no idea what to do with this franchise, man. They were, oh god, it's not good. Like, we have a platformer here where the only direct comparison I can think of is Yoshi's Universal Topsy-Turvy Gravitation on Game Boy Advance, and that's not a good place you want to be. It's just not. And also, why does he sound like he fails to conceal a fart when he dies? What is this franchise? Well, hold on. If you keep scrolling through the menu here, you see this one mysterious option, a 3D movie? Huh. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I almost forgot. This game doubled as the hype machine for the upcoming reboot of the franchise that was gonna kinda use this redesign, Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures. The moment you've all been waiting for.
Pac is back!
When did he leave? Oh god, what an unholy mess this whole Ghostly Adventures experiment was. I know there's the possibility of many of you growing up with this cartoon, so you have this nostalgia, and listen, I'm not about to bad talk it, it's just, I'm confused by it, and I think a lot of the longtime Pac-Man fans at the time were very confused by it, because we were led to believe at first that this was Pac-Man. It's just a different design, but it's the same character, and then I guess the reception wasn't going super hot, so Namco had to come in and say, no guys, it's okay. It's like a different universe or whatever. It's not the same Pac-Man. I don't think that was by design, so I guess I can only take it at face value as a weird time in Pac-Man's history. So Pac-Man is in school now, and he's friends with a whole bunch of other Pac people of differently shaped oval forms, and also 4 of the ghosts, because they're like double agents. Like this evil ghost Betrayus has been unleashed onto the world, and now there's like a war between the Pac people and the ghosts, but the 4 ghosts that we know and love, they are also our friends, and there's a love triangle now with Cylindria and the Pinky the Ghost? The show might be fine. It's weird to talk about after everything I've already gone through in this video. Maybe sometime in the future I will give this entire cartoon the watch that it probably deserves, but as it currently stands, Jesus, do you see how long this video already is? But I will say, I do find it oddly suspicious that this show popped up around the same time Sonic Boom did, which was kinda set out to do the same thing for that franchise. And when Sonic Boom is the comparison I got, I gotta say, I don't think you're in a good place. The biggest criticism that this cartoon got was that it was merely a vessel for a whole bunch of merchandise. There's a whole bunch of toys all over the place, and naturally, some video games too. And just in terms of being video games, they are kinda significant because they were the closest that we were going to get to Pac-Man World after years of getting nothing but weirdness. We got Ghostly Adventures 1 and 2 for both consoles and handhelds. And they're just kinda whatever? All 4 games follow the same structure of incredibly linear levels strung together by a world map, with the main gimmicks being the expected pellet gathering and ghost eating, and the addition of brand new forms to take for Pac-Man via a whole bunch of new berries, sort of like a Mario power-up with its mushrooms. The thing is though, I don't know if I would necessarily call these platformers, like they technically do fall under that umbrella, but you're never really required to hone your jumping skills with these the same way you were for the World games. You're really just walking in a straight line and then attacking some things every so often and then doing these contextual puzzles with the power-up. That's about it. To me, it seems like they were obviously aimed at a much younger demographic, considering, once again, these do double as a tie-in to a children's cartoon. And like the cartoon, I would believe it if you were nostalgic for these because they're not too terrible, like just on production value alone, it's fairly impressive stuff. They did succeed in making these games feel like the cartoon that was on at the time, it's just they're not really doing much for me. And on a more objective level, I do think both of these games are pretty homogenous. They both feel exactly the same, and many of the power-up segments in 2 feel like they were ripped straight out of 1. You got a lot of the same power-ups, and you're doing a lot of the same things. There are some gimmick stages that do differ, but all I'm saying here is we're not looking at the difference between Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, you know? Not terrible adventures, but nothing that's really gonna set your world on fire. Different story on the 3DS though, that's worth noting. They both follow the same ideas like I said before, but the first game is a side-scroller that, say it with me now, is devoid of creativity, or soul, or challenge. It's what you think it is. But then we got an actual 3D game for the second, also devoid of creativity and soul and challenge. The production value is kinda solid, I guess. The cutscenes do have more motion going on for them than I would come to expect for a lower budget platformer on the 3DS. Aside from Pac-Man clearly suffering from lockjaw, if the console games are meant to appeal to kids, the 3DS versions are meant to exist to either appeal to kids that didn't have any of the consoles, or just became really unlucky because for their birthday they asked for the game for their console and their parents got this instead because they didn't know any better. I feel like there's no in between. I'm sorry, that's usually the case for portable versions of multi-platform games. Go read a history book. Oh god, so do you finally believe me when I say that Pac-Man is actually one of the most bizarre series of all time? This yellow lad, whether he be a grown man with a mortgage or a child going to school, he was based off of a pizza and he's put on light shows, he has a wife and kids, a second set of wife and kids, he's acquaintances with Satan because Satan wants to go on a race every now and then. He went through a really colorful phase and spent one too many trips to the dentist. He lost parts of his body on multiple occasions. Gah! With Pac-Man Museum Plus, Pac-Man World Repack, and the Pac is Back meme, we got most of the bases of this franchise covered in the year 2022, and that's kinda cool. So if we're gonna celebrate the Pac, you gotta go big or go home, right? Congrats on over 40 years of games, whether they be good, bad, or indifferent, my man. Here's to 40 more. And at least 2 more additional wives? I'm not gonna judge. You do you. Go for happiness. Well, I did it. I talked about Pac-Man for over 50 minutes. And they said it couldn't be done. God, and this doesn't even get into the conversation of like all the canceled games that exist, all the mobile games that are out there. There's all the cameos and a whole bunch of other games like Smash obviously and Street Fighter Cross Tekken, can't forget about that one. God, there's like this baseball game that released in Japan that has a whole bunch of Namco characters, but like, human? So, we have a canon human Pac-Man? Oh.